I want to thank the witnesses, and I don't believe that People's House is a swamp. President Nixon was impeached for abuse of power because his conduct was, quote, undertaken for his personal political advantage and not in furtherance of any valid national policy objective. President Gerhardt, why was it significant that President Nixon acted for his personal political advantage and not in furtherance of any valid national policy objective?
It's primarily significant because in acting for his own personal benefit and not for the benefit of the country, he has crossed a line. The line here is very clear, and it becomes abuse of power when somebody's using the special authorities of their office for their own personal benefit and not the benefit of the country.
So can the same be said of President Trump?
It could be, yes. Yes.
Well, thank you. You know, I'm struck by the parallels because one of the things that Nixon did was he launched tax investigations of his political opponents. Here, the evidence shows Trump tried to launch a criminal investigation of his political opponent by a foreign government. We have heard evidence suggesting that President Trump did this for his own personal gain and not for any national policy interest. Although President Trump claims that he withheld the aid because of concerns about corruption, I do believe that we have example of the evidence of the truth.
Ambassador Sondland stated that the president only cares about big stuff. Big stuff. I noted there was big stuff going on in Ukraine, like a war with Russia. And Ambassador Sondland replied that he meant big stuff that benefits the president, like the Biden investigation that Mr. Giuliani was pushing.
What would the framers have thought of a president who only cares about the, quote, big stuff that benefits him?
The framers were extremely worried about a president who served only his own interests or the interests of foreign powers. That was their most serious concern when they designed the remedy of impeachment.
So the evidence also suggests that President Trump didn't even care if the investigation actually happened. What he really cared about was the public announcement of the investigation. So, Professor Carlin, how do we analyze these facts in the context of abuse of power?
Well, I think that to have a president ask for the investigation of his political opponents is an archetype of the abuse of power. And, you know, Mr. Buck mentioned past examples of this. And to say that those weren't impeachable, I think, is a big mistake. If a president wiretaps his opponents, that's a federal crime now. I don't know whether before the Wiretap Act of 1968 it was. But if a president wiretapped his opponents today, that would be impeachable conduct.
I also serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I understand how significant it is to foreign leaders to meet with our presidents. To attend a meeting in the Oval Office is very significant. President Zelensky is a newly elected head of state in a fledgling democracy. His country is at war with his neighbor. Russia invaded and is occupying his country's territory. He needed the military resources to defend his country. He needed the diplomatic recognition of the American president, and he was prepared to do whatever the president demanded. Many years ago, I worked in the nation's largest trauma unit as a PA, a physician assistant. I saw people at their worst in severe pain after accidents or acts of violence. Patients I took care of were desperate and afraid and had to wait 5 to 8 hours to be seen. Can you imagine for 1 minute if I had told my patients, look, I can move you up in line and take care of your pain, but I do need a favor from you, though. My patients were in pain and they were desperate, and they would have agreed to do anything I asked. This would have been such an abuse of my position because of the power dynamic. I had the power to relieve my patients from experiencing pain. It's fundamentally wrong and in many cases illegal for us to use power to take advantage of those in crisis, especially a president, especially when lives are at stake. I yield back.